What if I told you that right now in 2025, there are killers walking free in Florida who think they got away with murder? What if I told you that somewhere in the Sunshine State, families are still searching for answers to questions that have haunted them for decades? 8 human skeletons buried in Fort Myers woods, a surveillance camera that captured a killer's face, but cruel timing made it invisible. A racist keychain left with bones that stumped investigators for 34 years. A teenager who vanished while hitchhiking, only for a dying biker to confess to her horrific fate in the Everglades. These aren't just cold cases gathering dust in filing cabinets. These are active investigations that have taken shocking turns in 2025, with new DNA evidence, artificial intelligence, and forensic breakthroughs breathing life into mysteries that seemed impossible to solve. But here's what makes these cases truly terrifying. Each one reveals how easily someone can vanish, how perfectly a killer can hide in plain sight, and how the truth can remain buried for decades while families desperately search for answers. I'm about to take you inside 4 of Florida's most haunting unsolved murders, cases that will make you question everything you think you know about justice, family loyalty, and the lengths people will go to uncover the truth. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to search for a missing family member for over 30 years? Have you ever seen security footage so close to solving a case, yet so frustratingly useless? These families have lived that nightmare, and their stories will stay with you long after this video ends. Before we dive deep into these mysteries, hit that like button if you're ready to explore some of the most complex cases Florida has ever seen. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the updates coming out of these investigations in 2025 are game-changing, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Tonight, you're going to meet Howard Kip Evans, whose identity was stolen for 3 decades until a mother's Facebook post changed everything. You'll see the most frustrating surveillance footage in criminal history, where fate itself seemed to protect Jennifer Kesse's abductor. You'll discover how a serial killer created a secret graveyard that investigators are still trying to unlock. And you'll hear a deathbed confession so disturbing that it's haunted the Everglades for nearly 30 years. These cases matter in 2025 because they prove that the past never truly stays buried in Florida. New technology, relentless families, and fresh eyes on old evidence are turning impossible cases into solvable mysteries. Ready to uncover the truth? Let's begin. The Lopsided Jaw John Doe. For 34 years, he was just bones and a racist keychain left in the Florida wilderness. But the story of how he got his name back will shock you. January 18, 1986. A person exploring the remote depths of Bulow Creek State Park stumbled upon something that would haunt investigators for over 3 decades. Hidden among 5,600 acres of old-growth forest and swampy hammocks, human skeletal remains lay scattered across the forest floor. The scene told a story of violence and abandonment. Animals had disturbed the bones, dragging pieces throughout the wooded area. The location was perfect for concealing a crime. Miles from civilization, accessible only to the most determined hikers and campers who ventured deep into Florida's wilderness. When the Volusia County Sheriff's Office arrived, they faced a puzzle with almost no pieces. The victim had been dead for months, possibly years. An autopsy revealed the devastating truth. This was a homicide. Someone had beaten this person to death with such force that it left unmistakable trauma on the bones. But the most shocking discovery wasn't the evidence of violence. It was a keychain found with the remains, engraved with words that would define this case for decades. KK, member in good standing. Who was this person? Why were they murdered? And what did that keychain really mean? For over 30 years, he existed only as measurements and medical observations in a case file. White male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches, somewhere between 20 and 35 years old when he died. Light brown hair that had been worn in a ponytail. Poor dental health that suggested a hard life. But one feature made him unforgettable to every investigator who worked his case. A severe facial deformity called hemifacial microsomia. His lower jaw protruded dramatically to the right, creating the distinctive appearance that earned him the name Lopsided Jaw John Doe. Forensic artists created facial reconstructions in 2014, hoping someone would recognize that unique profile. The images were distributed across Florida and beyond, but they generated nothing. No missing person reports matched his description. No family came forward to claim him. He became a ghost, someone who had lived, loved, and died, but left no trace in official records. Investigators suspected he lived on society's margins, possibly transient, possibly involved with motorcycle clubs based on other items found at the scene. The lack of identification wasn't just frustrating for law enforcement. It meant this person's family had been living in limbo for decades, not knowing if their missing loved one was dead or alive, while his killer walked free. That keychain remained the only real clue, but it raised more questions than it answered. Was he really affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan? Was it planted by his killer, or did it represent something else entirely? The break that solved this decades-old mystery came from the most unlikely source, a Facebook group for missing persons. In 2019, detectives monitoring online missing person communities noticed something that made them stop scrolling. A mother had posted about her son who vanished in 1984 from Volusia County. She was still searching, still hoping, still believing he might come home. The timing was perfect. Her missing son had disappeared around the same time the skeletal remains were estimated to have been placed in Buller Creek. More importantly, her son had a distinctive facial deformity. Detectives reached out to the family and collected a DNA sample from the mother. The sample was sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification in the FBI. Using forensic genetic genealogy, the same technology that's been solving cold cases across the country, they began building family trees and comparing genetic markers. In April 2020, after months of analysis, the results came back, a familial match. After 34 years, Lopsided Jaw John Doe finally had a name, Howard Kip Evans, born March 25, 1955. He was about 29 years old when he disappeared in 1984. The identification of Kip Evans should have brought closure, but instead it deepened the mystery surrounding that keychain. When investigators contacted Evans' family with the news, they made a shocking discovery. The family had never known Kip to be involved with the Ku Klux Klan. They had no knowledge of any racist affiliations, no awareness of extremist beliefs, nothing that would explain why he would carry such a keychain. This revelation transformed the keychain from a clue into a riddle. If Evans wasn't a KKK member, why was the keychain with his remains? Three theories emerged. First, perhaps Evans was secretly involved with the Klan and his family simply didn't know. Second, maybe his killer planted the keychain as a red herring, designed to throw investigators off the real motive. Third, the keychain could have been a message, either a symbol of why he was killed or a statement about what his killer believed. The connection to the local biker community adds another layer of complexity. Some motorcycle clubs in the 1980s had documented ties to white supremacist groups, while others were simply rebellious subcultures with no racial agenda. After 34 years of waiting, the Evans family finally knew what happened to their missing son and brother. But knowing his name didn't bring them justice. His killer is still out there, and the motive remains as mysterious as ever. The keychain continues to haunt this case, a piece of evidence that's either the key to solving the murder or the perfect misdirection by a killer who understood how to manipulate an investigation. But if you think a racist keychain is disturbing, wait until you see what happened in Orlando, where a killer was caught on camera but fate itself seemed to protect their identity. The Jennifer Kesse's shadow. The perfect crime caught on camera, ruined by perfect timing. This is the story of how fate itself seemed to conspire with a killer. January 24, 2006 started like any other Tuesday for Jennifer Kesse. The 24-year-old finance manager had just returned from a romantic vacation in St. Croix with her boyfriend. She was living her dream life in a brand new condo at the upscale Mosaic at Millennia Complex in Orlando. The night before, Jennifer had followed her routine perfectly. She spoke to her parents around 10 p.m., then called her boyfriend. Everything was normal. She was tired but happy, talking about work the next day and weekend plans. But Jennifer Kesse never made it to work that Tuesday morning. When she failed to show up at her office, something completely out of character for the responsible young professional, her family knew something was terribly wrong. They rushed to her apartment using the spare key she had given them. What they found inside was deeply disturbing. The condo showed no signs of forced entry or struggle, But the scene told a story of interrupted routine. A wet towel lay on her bed next to clothes she had laid out for work. Her shower was damp, suggesting she had gotten ready that morning. Her keys, phone, purse, and briefcase were gone. So was her black 2004 Chevrolet Malibu. It appeared Jennifer had simply vanished between her front door and her car in the parking garage. But there was something else that made Jennifer's family uneasy. She had recently complained about construction workers at her complex, which was undergoing renovations. Many of the workers didn't speak English, and Jennifer had told her family that some of them made her uncomfortable with catcalls and unwanted attention. She had even mentioned feeling watched. 2 days after Jennifer disappeared, her car was found abandoned in the parking lot of another apartment complex just 1.2 miles from her home. But this discovery would lead to one of the most frustrating pieces of evidence in criminal history. A security camera had captured someone parking Jennifer's car at approximately noon on January 24th, the day she vanished. Finally, investigators thought they had their suspect on video. But what happened next defies belief. The security camera took a snapshot every 3 seconds as the person walked away from Jennifer's car. In frame after frame, investigators watched as the suspect moved through the parking lot, but in every single image where the person's face should have been visible, it was blocked by the black metal bars of a fence. Not once, not twice, but in every single frame. The odds of this happening by pure chance are astronomical. It's as if the universe itself conspired to protect this killer's identity. NASA's imaging experts were brought in to analyze the footage. They enhanced every pixel, adjusted contrast and brightness, tried every technological trick available. All they could determine was that the person was between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches tall and wore clothing similar to a painter or manual laborer, exactly like the construction workers who had made Jennifer uncomfortable. The car itself had been meticulously cleaned. Only a small DNA fiber and a single latent fingerprint were recovered, but neither matched anyone in the database. A scent-tracking dog followed a trail from the abandoned car back to Jennifer's apartment complex, suggesting the perpetrator had walked back after ditching the vehicle. This footage has become legendary in law enforcement circles. It represents the cruelest twist of fate in modern criminal investigations. A perfect view of a killer rendered completely useless by timing and physics. The Kesse family quickly realized they were fighting two battles: finding Jennifer and fighting the system that was supposed to help them. The Orlando Police Department initially treated Jennifer's disappearance as a possible voluntary missing person case. They suggested she might have left on her own, despite everything her family knew about her character and circumstances. Frustrated by what they saw as a lackluster investigation, the Kesse family took unprecedented action. In 2018, they sued the Orlando Police Department to obtain the complete case file. This legal battle wasn't just about access to information, it was about accountability. When they finally received over 16,000 pages of documents, the family discovered what they believed were significant gaps in the investigation. Critical leads hadn't been pursued. Potential witnesses weren't interviewed. Evidence wasn't properly analyzed. The lawsuit had an unintended consequence. It forced the Orlando Police Department to step back from the case entirely. In December 2022, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement took over the investigation. For the first time in years, there's real hope in the Jennifer Kesse case, and 2025 has brought developments that have investigators more optimistic than they've been in decades. On May 20th, 2025, what would have been Jennifer's 44th birthday, the FDLE made a stunning announcement. The case is no longer considered cold. They have identified several persons of interest and discovered new evidence that had never been tested. But the most exciting development involves that infamous surveillance footage. The FDLE is now considering using artificial intelligence to enhance the grainy images in ways that weren't possible when the footage was first discovered. AI technology has advanced to the point where it might be able to fill in the gaps left by those fence posts, potentially revealing the killer's face after nearly 2 decades. In July 2025, investigators announced that new DNA evidence had helped narrow their suspect list. The investigation is active, focused, and moving forward with renewed energy. The construction worker theory has gained credibility with these new developments. Many of those workers were undocumented and left Florida after the renovation project ended, making them difficult to track down for the original investigation. How many security cameras are in your neighborhood? Do you ever think about how easily someone could disappear between their front door and their car? Jennifer's case proves that even in our surveillance-heavy world, killers can still find ways to hide in plain sight. The cruel irony of Jennifer Kesse's case isn't just that her killer was caught on camera, it's that technology and timing collaborated to create the perfect hiding place. But in 2025, new technology might finally undo that cosmic injustice. From one invisible killer to a predator who left 8 victims in a Florida forest, believing his secret graveyard would never be discovered. The Fort Myers 8, a land surveyor's routine job, became Florida's most disturbing discovery, a secret graveyard that revealed the work of one of the state's most prolific killers. March 2007. A land surveyor working in a wooded area near Rockville and Arcadia Streets in East Fort Myers made a discovery that would haunt investigators for decades. What started as a routine property assessment became a crime scene of unprecedented scope. The first skeleton was just the beginning. As authorities expanded their search across a 200-yard radius, they kept finding more remains. One skeleton became 2, then 3, then 4. By the time the excavation was complete, investigators had recovered 8 complete or partial human skeletons from the Florida soil. The scene was methodically planned and executed. Every victim had been stripped naked before being disposed of. No clothing, no personal items, no jewelry, nothing that could help identify who these men had been in life. Someone had taken extraordinary care to erase their identities completely. Forensic analysis revealed the victims were all white males between the ages of 21 and 40. The remains had been in the ground for 10 to 12 years, placing their deaths in the mid-1990s. The medical examiner ruled all 8 deaths as homicides, with evidence pointing to strangulation and mutilation, though advanced decomposition made determining exact causes of death nearly impossible. The location itself told a story. This wasn't a random dumping ground. It was a carefully chosen burial site in a remote area where the killer could work undisturbed. The victims appeared to have been killed elsewhere and transported to this location for disposal. But who were these 8 men? And who had turned this quiet patch of Florida woods into a mass grave? The answer pointed to one of Florida's most depraved serial killers, Daniel Conahan, already sitting on death row for a remarkably similar murder. Conahan wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who had perfected a system of luring, torturing, and murdering vulnerable men across Southwest Florida throughout the 1990s. His victims shared a tragic profile: gay men, transients, drifters, and others living on society's margins who were unlikely to be immediately reported missing. His method was as calculated as it was horrific. Conahan, a former nurse who understood anatomy and death, would approach potential victims with offers of easy money. He claimed to be a photographer looking for models for nude or bondage photo shoots. Once he had lured them to remote, wooded areas, often the same forests where the Fort Myers 8 were later discovered, he would unleash his true nature. The attacks followed a disturbing pattern. Victims were bound, sexually assaulted, tortured, and finally strangled. Conahan often mutilated his victims' genitals, a signature element that helped investigators connect cases across different jurisdictions. Conahan was finally caught and convicted in 1999 for the 1996 kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of Richard Allen Montgomery. The key witness in that case was Stanley Burden, a man who survived a nearly identical attack by Conahan in 1994. Burden's testimony was crucial, but even more important was where his attack took place, in the exact same woods where the Fort Myers 8 would be discovered years later. The connection between Conahan and the mass grave wasn't just geographical. Every aspect of the Fort Myers 8 matched his established pattern: vulnerable male victims, remote wooded disposal sites, evidence of binding and strangulation, and the complete removal of identifying materials. Investigators believe Conahan is responsible for as many as 19 murders across Southwest Florida, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in state history. The Fort Myers 8 represent the largest collection of his suspected victims ever discovered in one location. Over the years, painstaking forensic work and advances in genetic genealogy have given 4 of the 8 victims their names back. John Blevins, 38, was identified in 2007. He was a transient, last seen in 1995. Eric David Kohler, just 21 years old, was also identified in 2007. He had disappeared from nearby Port Charlotte in 1995. Jonathan James Taihei, 24, was identified in 2008 as a drifter last seen in Fort Myers in 1995. The most recent identification came in September 2022, when advanced genetic genealogy by Parabon Nanolabs finally gave a name to the 4th victim, Robert Ronald Bobby Soden, who was 30 when he was last seen in 1996. Each identification brought immeasurable relief to families who had spent decades wondering what happened to their missing loved ones. But it also highlighted the tragedy of the 4 men who remain nameless. These unidentified victims exist only as John Does in case files. Facial reconstructions have been created and distributed to the public, but so far no one has come forward to claim them. They represent not just victims of violence, but victims of a society that allowed certain people to disappear without trace. The contrast is heartbreaking. 4 families finally have closure and can properly mourn their loved ones, while 4 other families somewhere still don't know their missing son, brother, or father is dead. Daniel Conahan, now 71, remains on death row at Union Correctional Institution for the murder of Richard Allen Montgomery. Despite overwhelming circumstantial evidence connecting him to the Fort Myers 8, he has never been charged with their murders. The reason is frustratingly simple. Without positive identification of all victims, prosecutors cannot build the strongest possible case. Each unidentified victim represents a gap in the prosecution's ability to establish a complete pattern and timeline. Conahan has consistently denied involvement in any murders beyond the one for which he was convicted. His silence has been absolute, offering no information that might help identify the remaining victims or provide closure to their families. The Fort Myers Police Department's cold case unit continues to focus primarily on victim identification rather than prosecution. Their reasoning is sound. Giving the remaining 4 men their names back is the first step toward building a case that could finally hold Conahan accountable for the full extent of his crimes. In a cruel twist, time may be running out. Conahan is aging on death row, and any information he might possess about his victims' identities could die with him. The Fort Myers 8 case stands as one of Florida's largest and most disturbing unsolved mass murders. A secret graveyard that has revealed some of its secrets but refuses to surrender them all. But sometimes the most haunting cases are the ones that started it all, like a teenage girl who trusted the wrong people on a sunny Miami afternoon. Amy Billig's Everglades nightmare. A simple hitchhike to Dad's gallery became a 50-year nightmare that consumed a mother's life and may have ended in the most horrific way possible. March 5th, 1974, was supposed to be just another sunny afternoon in Coconut Grove, Miami. 17-year-old Amy Billig needed lunch money, so she decided to hitchhike the short distance to her father's art gallery, less than a mile from home. Amy was the embodiment of 1970s free spirit culture. She loved poetry, music, and nature. She worked training dolphins at the Miami Seaquarium and dreamed of making a difference in the world. For teenagers like Amy, hitchhiking wasn't considered dangerous. It was just another way to get around. But March 5th, 1974 was different. 2 rival motorcycle gangs, the Outlaws and the Pagans, were passing through Miami on their way to Bike Week in Daytona Beach. These weren't weekend riders. These were hardcore criminal organizations with reputations for violence, drugs, and worse. Amy was last seen by construction workers on Main Highway in Coconut Grove, her thumb out, waiting for a ride. She never made it to her father's gallery. She never came home that night. The only physical evidence ever found was Amy's Instamatic camera, discovered 13 days later on the side of Florida's Turnpike, 250 miles away from where she vanished. The film inside contained overexposed photos of a truck and a van, but investigators could never trace the vehicles. From the very beginning, leads pointed toward the biker gangs. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a young woman matching Amy's description with bikers in the days following her disappearance. But the biker community operated by its own rules. with codes of silence that made penetrating their world nearly impossible. What happened next turned Amy's disappearance from a tragedy into a torture that lasted more than 2 decades. Almost immediately, the Billig family was targeted by people seeking to exploit their desperation. Two teenage brothers were arrested for trying to extort $30,000 from the family, falsely claiming they had kidnapped Amy. But that was just the beginning. For 21 years, Amy's mother, Susan, endured a psychological campaign of terror, orchestrated by Henry Johnson Blair, a U.S. Customs agent who became obsessed with the case. Blair made hundreds of phone calls to Susan, describing in graphic detail how Amy was supposedly being held by a sex trafficking ring. His calls were calculated torture. He would describe Amy being sold, beaten, and moved from place to place. He claimed she was alive but being held against her will in various locations across the country and even overseas. Each call gave Susan just enough hope to keep her searching while inflicting maximum emotional damage. Blair's torment was so systematic and cruel that it became a criminal case in itself. He was finally caught in 1995 through phone tracing technology and convicted of stalking. But the damage was done. Susan had spent over 2 decades chasing false leads, traveling across the country, and even to the United Kingdom, following Blair's fabricated clues. The cruelest part? Blair had no connection to Amy's actual disappearance. He was simply a sadistic individual who found pleasure in exploiting a mother's love in desperation. In 1996, Susan Billig received a call that would either finally provide answers or deliver one last cruel deception. Paul Branch, a former high-ranking member of the Pagans motorcycle gang, was dying. On his deathbed, he contacted investigators with a confession that would forever change how Amy's case was understood. Branch revealed that years earlier, he had lied to Susan Billig when he claimed Amy was his girlfriend and was still alive somewhere with the bikers. Now, facing death, he wanted to tell the truth about what really happened on March 5, 1974. According to Branch's confession, Pagans members had indeed picked up Amy while she was hitchhiking. They took her to a party deep in the Everglades where she was drugged and brutally gang raped by multiple members of the gang. When Amy fought back against her attackers, showing the same spirit that had defined her life, the bikers decided she was too much of a risk to let go. Branch claimed they gave her a fatal drug overdose, then disposed of her body in the most horrific way imaginable. They threw her into the alligator-infested swamp, ensuring that no trace of her would ever be found. Miami police detectives found Branch's confession credible because he provided details about Amy's case that had never been made public, including a description of her appendectomy scar that only someone who had seen her body would know. But Branch's deathbed confession raised as many questions as it answered. Some investigators questioned whether his widow might have been motivated by money offered by documentary filmmakers covering Amy's story. Without physical evidence or corroborating witnesses, the confession remained just another story in a case full of lies and false leads. Susan Billig spent 31 years searching for her daughter, following every lead, chasing every hope. She died in 2005 without ever knowing for certain what happened to Amy. Amy's father died in 1993, also going to his grave without answers. How safe did you feel hitchhiking when you were younger? Do you remember a time when getting into a stranger's car seemed normal? Amy's case represents the end of an era of innocence, when a simple ride to Dad's gallery could lead to a nightmare in the Everglades. 4 cases, 4 decades, 4 families who refused to give up. What connects these Florida mysteries isn't just geography, it's the devastating power of determination in the face of impossible odds. Look at the patterns. Kip Evans lay nameless for 34 years until his mother's Facebook post caught a detective's attention. Jennifer Kesse's family sued their own police department to get access to her case files. The Fort Myers 8 families never stopped pushing for identification of their loved ones. Susan Billig spent her entire adult life searching for Amy, enduring 21 years of psychological torture from a stranger. These cases prove that breakthroughs don't happen because time passes. They happen because people refuse to let time win. In 2025, we're witnessing a revolution in cold case investigations. Forensic genetic genealogy can now identify victims and suspects from DNA samples that were useless just 10 years ago. Artificial intelligence can enhance surveillance footage in ways that seem like science fiction when Jennifer Kesse disappeared. Social media connects families across continents, allowing a mother's desperate Facebook post to solve a mystery that stumped professionals for decades. But technology alone doesn't solve cases. Behind every breakthrough is a family member who kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept demanding answers when everyone else had moved on. These cases teach us that justice isn't a system. It's a choice that people make every single day. The bigger truth here is uncomfortable. These victims represent countless others who vanished without leaving behind determined families or compelling evidence. How many Kip Evans are still lying in unnamed graves? How many Jennifer Kesses disappeared without security cameras? How many mass graves like Fort Myers haven't been discovered yet? How many Amy Billigs were taken by predators who left no deathbed confessions? Florida's unique geography, vast swamplands, dense forests, countless bodies of water, has always made it a perfect place to hide crimes. But that same landscape that concealed evidence for decades is now revealing its secrets to families who never stopped looking and technology that never stops advancing. These aren't just cold cases gathering dust in evidence rooms. These are active investigations in 2025 because the people who love these victims are still fighting for them. Kip Evans has his name back. Jennifer Kesse's case is heating up with new DNA evidence and AI analysis. 4 of the Fort Myers 8 have been identified, with investigators working to name the remaining 4. Amy Billig's story stands as a testament to a mother's unbreakable love. Every one of these cases moved forward because someone refused to accept unsolved as a final answer. If these stories affected you, if you believe families deserve answers and victims deserve justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into cases that matter. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever heard of any of these cases before? Do you have theories about what really happened? Your engagement helps these stories reach more people. And sometimes that's exactly what breaks a case wide open. The families in these stories never stopped believing that the truth would surface. They were right. In Florida, the past never stays buried. It just waits for the right person to start digging.